Cyberpunk 2077. Where do I even begin with this game? At this point, there isn't anything that hasn't already been said about this game's rocky development cycle. Its countless controversies, both pre and post-launch, the scandalous review process leading up to the game's release, the current state of the game on last-gen consoles, and its myriad of technical issues. For better or worse, Cyberpunk 2077 was hyped up to be a proverbial middle finger to everything that's currently wrong with the gaming industry. By now you know the lay of the land. Loot boxes, shady monetary schemes, live service fiascos, and so on and so forth. Cyberpunk was meant to be a wake-up call to developers and publishers everywhere, with really only one intention in mind: to remind the world that AAA single-player RPGs aren't going anywhere anytime soon, and the massive hype surrounding this game, backed up by impressive pre-order numbers and the fact that the game has already made history for being the biggest PC launch ever.
Nice.
You could argue that developer CD Projekt Red got their point across successfully. But what about the actual game itself? The fact that customers were openly lied to about aspects surrounding the game's performance on consoles, or the fact that highly anticipated features were either undercooked to some capacity or cut entirely. Before I go into great detail about my experience with the game, running on a fairly high-end PC with no crashes, only a few quest-breaking bugs demanding I reload a save file, and a relatively stable 60 frames per second performance, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. I make absolutely no excuses for the way the higher-ups over at CD Projekt Red have handled this game's development and launch. And if you are one of the many players watching this who feel like you've been lied to, betrayed, or let down, then rest assured, I get it. This game needed more time in development, and the fact that the game was delayed a whopping 4 times and still arrived at the finish line in an objectively unfinished state should in turn speak volumes about the levels of mismanagement conducted by the delusional executives over at CD Projekt Red. And they have a long road of redemption ahead of themselves.
Oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
But by the time that I'm making this video, I've sunk close to around 90 hours into this game, and all the PC footage you're currently seeing is captured by me for my second playthrough. And as it stands right now, I really have no intentions of stopping anytime soon. I've also come to the conclusion that the last time I had this much fun playing an open world action RPG was way back when Bethesda was still considered to be a reputable company. And no, I'm not going to hit you with a cliched or a redundant line like,
"This is a hot take,"
or a controversial opinion, because the game still maintains high ratings on Steam, and if you peruse any social media platform of your choice, you're going to find an abundance of people who have expressed very positive opinions on the game. I mean, hell, there's even an entirely separate subreddit dedicated to players gushing over individual moments stemming from either the gameplay, characters, or the overall narrative. My overall thoughts on the game can be summarized as following. Cyberpunk 2077 is flawed, imperfect, buggy, and riddled with annoyances and obvious shortcomings. Yet even so, I find it to be completely unforgettable and impossible to pull myself away from. In this video, I'm going to go over everything that I love about the game, things that I'm indifferent about, and also its glaring issues that I hope to see addressed by way of eventual post-launch support, whenever that actually becomes a reality. Positives will be up first, followed by my complaints with the game and an overall summary towards the end. First up is Night City, which I'll be analyzing from both an aesthetic point of view and a functional point of view. You can probably already figure out which one of these two categories fall into the positive side of the spectrum and the negative side of things. With that mystery out of the way, holy mother of crap in a bagel on a Tuesday in France. This game is gorgeous. The sumptuous lighting, the looming skyscrapers, density of buildings, artistic choices, buttery smooth transitions from outdoor to indoor environments that are completely free of loading screens, the sense of place, variety of locales, just the sheer scale of it all. It's honestly kind of incredible. So much so that there are individual sights and sounds in this game that I've had fairly vivid dreams about. Night City is the type of place I've always wanted to explore in a video game, and as someone who can't forget the first time they set foot in Bioshocks Rapture in Colombia, or the Elder Scrolls Cyrodiil in Skyrim, I similarly can't take my mind off of Night City. From the key players that inhabit this place that you'll get to know over the course of the game, to its many places the different quests take you to, the eye candy in this game is sublime, further backed up by heaps of marvelous soundscapes, from the ambient music to a good majority of the voice acting. All in all, the atmosphere is almost second to none. Furthermore, considering we currently live in a very promiscuous present-day reality where OnlyFans is a potential and certified goldmine for really anyone with a horny enough fanbase, I find Cyberpunk's hyper-sexualized vision of the future to actually be surprisingly grounded. I'll get to how Night City actually functions and behaves in my negatives later on in the video, but I'm no qualms about describing this game as being overall a visual and auditory masterpiece. That is, when it actually works as intended.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
As for the story, I find it to be really gripping for the most part. Granted, the few major and heavily scripted detours the game's main story takes you on drag on for far too long and don't hold up all that well on subsequent playthroughs. But by stuffing many of the game's key story moments with great characters that you really grow to care for, I'm willing to mostly forgive the narrative's awkward pacing. From Judy to Panam, Jackie, Rogue, Goro, and even minor characters like Mitch and Saul, the writers over at CD Projekt Red have done a damn good job presenting finely wrought characters, many of which don't even get the screen time they fully deserve. As for Johnny Silverhand, I found him to be a bit of a grower at first, but by the end of the main story, the relationship between him and my V I created had morphed into something really profound, and I even found that Keanu Reeves' occasionally stilted voice acting became charming in a so bad it's good kind of way.
Minus the charisma. An impressive cop.
While we're on the topic of the voice acting, I also want to give some major props to voice actor Jeremy Lee for her outstanding performance as female V, tapping into a wide range of emotions and firing off responses in a way that I always felt aligned with my own expectations of how I wanted my V to respond in the many dialogue sequences the game presents you with. So although not every single performance in the game is of this caliber, I do find an overwhelming amount of the voice acting in this game to be fairly outstanding. One observation that has been made about the game's storyline is that the entire time bomb plot device surrounding that of V's character really doesn't make a lick of sense given the game's open world nature, effectively creating a sense of urgency that the game largely kinda glosses over all too soon. As far as actually experiencing the narrative and its many delightful characters, I'd say that Cyberpunk 2077 fully lives up to the hype, spoon-feeding you heaps of story moments that feel right at home for a top-tier CD Projekt Red production, even though not everything is perfect. And without giving away too much, I was honestly kinda blown away by the sheer multitude of endings the game presents you with, at least from an actual content standpoint, as the amount of sequences and variables that can differ depending on some crucial choices made towards the end is nothing short of impressive. Although I definitely wish that the implications of these endings would vary a lot more than they currently do, and with the exception of a couple of quest lines and character interactions, much of what you spend your time doing in this game don't impact said implications of these endings all that much. Even so, it's impressive how ludicrously different some of these ending sequences are. So much so that I wish that the game didn't telegraph these endings in a way closely resembling that of a choose-your-own-adventure kind of book. But we'll talk player choice later on in the video. Alright, so what do you actually do in this game? Well, it's a lot to go over. Driving, shooting, sneaking, hacking, crafting, looting, upgrading, partaking in story moments, or otherwise just playing the part of a tourist, taking in all of Night City. I think the best way I can summarize my feelings with what this game offers in terms of gameplay is that it doesn't do any one of these things better than any game that's primarily centered around these gameplay systems. So yeah, there are literally hundreds of games out there that feature driving mechanics far superior to those found in this game. There are also games with more satisfying gunplay, more involved stealth mechanics, and the thrill of acquiring new gear in this game falters when compared to something like Diablo or Borderlands. But the fact that I found myself actually having fun doing mostly all of these things in Cyberpunk was more than enough to keep me engaged. I liked sneaking around and looking for alternate routes to my objective, in what essentially felt like a love letter to Deus Ex. I also enjoyed deciding what quick hacks to perform in conjunction with what weapon during any given encounter, and I certainly enjoyed assuming control over cameras and turrets and effectively confusing the ever-living shit out of an entire room of enemies, and landing devastating one-shot, one-kill headshots from around the corner was always satisfying. Hell, I even enjoyed saving up resources I gathered and deciding how to spend my precious crafting material to acquire new gear and cyberware, while also carving my path through that attribute and its corresponding skill trees accordingly. And honestly, in terms of what kind of approach you can take with regards to both encounters and skill trees, I find Cyberpunk to be on par with something like Deus Ex Human Revolution, a game that I too loved for the amount of decision making with regards to how you want to fulfill certain objectives, some of which won't even be possible without the right amount of points dumped into a certain attribute. And don't worry, I promise I'll talk more about the driving in this game when deemed appropriate. But by far the biggest strength in this game is the quest design and variety. Like holy shit, the amount of interesting tangents and moments found in this game is fan-fucking-tastic. I won't spoil everything, but from befriending a vending machine to smash and grab like heists, to helping a cop rescue his nephew from a child abductor, which in turn sends you down an insanely disturbing rabbit hole, to unraveling a rogue AI conspiracy, to this this fucking quest line. Cyberpunk is the type of game with moments I wish I could forget all about just so I could experience them all over again for the first time. And with a few of them even featuring multiple outcomes and some degree of player choice, they're simply a thrill to experience. Oh, did I mention that this game even lets you partake in a hardcore show from a first-person perspective with fully mo-capped musicians? Yeah, this game is fucking awesome when it comes to variety. And here ends the part of the video where I'm gushing about this game. A game that is a jack of all trades, but really only a master of atmosphere and quest design. And so begins the part you've all been waiting for. The negatives about Cyberpunk 2077. I'll start with some of the lesser evils in this game and gradually work my way up to the parts that really annoy me with this game. Keep in mind that I won't discuss any of the technical bugs in this game, of which there are plenty of, because it's such a well-established phenomenon at this point. So buckle in and I'll tell you about the parts of this game that I wish could have been handled a hell of a lot better. After spending a lot of time with this game, I've definitely raised my fair share of questions. Chief among them being, why is the driving in this game so floaty even when played with an Xbox controller on PC? Why are there heaps of locked buildings and areas scattered around Night City that have a permanent open sign glowing right on top of it? And what's with the melee combat in this game and the dreadfully boring beat on the brat missions? I could probably sit here and list off things all day that I wish could have been handled better, or aspects that reek of a yet to be fully finished product. Previously, I spoke about wanting to analyze Night City from a functional point of view. A city that is so delightful to be in visually, but that sadly offers little in the way of cool things to do outside of missions and cookie-cutter vendors. Hell, even just adding one barbershop or a tattoo parlor in this game would have gone a long way to making me avoid doing missions for a brief period of time. In the YouTube video entitled Cyberpunk 2077, a post-mortem of 2020's biggest game, the creator of said video made a very well-warranted point about how this game presents its content, which leaves a lot to be desired, to put it mildly. Littering the entire map with question marks and exclamation points, a trend I've already grown weary of after years of playing World of Warcraft, is simply an archaic design choice that has no business being in a modern game, especially when you lump car purchases and other less interesting side activities together with these markers, making it hard to decipher, let alone remember what type of gigs and side missions you actually want to replay on future playthroughs. This in turn brings me to one aspect of this game I don't see being discussed enough, being that of the UI. My goodness, the menus in this game are a chore to navigate and are in desperate need of some quality of life improvements. Having to constantly unequip weapon mods when equipping new weapons is tedious, as is trying to disassemble or craft multiple items at a time, resulting in a crap ton of busy work that takes you out of the game time and time again, with seemingly every action requiring more inputs than what's actually necessary. And don't even get me started on the minimap in this game. It's such a bizarre thing to witness how poorly some of the menus and UI elements are organized and handled, when so much else of this game from an attention to detail standpoint is so outstanding. And giving players a city of this scope, magnitude, and beauty so little in the way of doing in terms of actual side activities is potential lost and then some. And that's not even taking into account the bare bones pedestrian AI in this game. While you will occasionally stumble upon some cool details, like guitar players busking out in the street, couples getting into heated arguments and the like, the NPCs in this game are as artificial as they come, not being able to work a way around traffic jams and having little more to do than to simply walk from point A to point B. All of the things I've discussed up until now are issues that I describe as being frustrating but by no means a deal breaker, which in turn brings me to the worst offenders that plague this game. The police system in this game is, to put it bluntly, downright abysmal. Cops spawning in behind you and laying you to waste in a matter of seconds is just downright laughable. And the only positive thing I will say about this aspect of the game is that I pretty much never had to deal with it frequently in my 2 playthroughs, but whenever I accidentally did, it was immersion shattering to say the least. Another big point of contention with this game that I don't outright hate but feel was hyped up to unreasonable levels, and that is the life path system. Out of the 3 available life paths, only 2 of them actually makes any sense. Nomad being one of them, for tying in beautifully with the quest line surrounding Pan Am and the Aldecaldos. And on my first playthrough as a street kid, I found the underdog mentality of this life path to be the most logical when setting the stage for the events in the game. Corpo, on the other hand, well, except for 1 or 2 missions where you're granted wildly differing outcomes when interacting with Corpo figures, I honestly couldn't tell you the difference between a Corpo playthrough and a street kid playthrough. And the way in which this game transitions from V being a sleazy corporate agent to all of a sudden becoming a broke mercenary with little to show off by way of the game's obligatory cutscene montage is so out of left field and nonsensical that it raised the question of what is even the point? Sure, there are story junctions where your choice of life path do come into play, but in some cases they are so few and far between that it begs the question as to why this feature of the game was so talked about to begin with. It's merely an arbitrary choice that gives you 1 or 2 bonus missions and a couple of alternate quest choices. That's it. And as far as player choice with long-term repercussions come and go, Cyberpunk 2077 does not live up to the high standards set by CD Projekt Red's previous games, making it yet another aspect of the game that suffers from untapped potential. There are a handful of more annoyances with this game that I could go over, and that I imagine would be easy to fix by way of future patches, but the most notable shortcomings in this game are forever branded in the product, and your mileage will likely vary depending on what type of experience you want out of it as a whole. There are other things I could discuss about this game, like how utterly fantastic some of these character-specific storylines are, or how I found the male voice actor for V to pale in comparison to the aforementioned female counterpart. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, then it's that Cyberpunk 2077 only fulfilled a handful of the lofty promises that were made during its development. And witnessing firsthand how poorly the game runs on last-gen consoles is disheartening to say the least. And for obvious reasons, I don't think that Cyberpunk 2077 is the incendiary masterpiece that it clearly wants to, and even has the potential to be. I do, however, don't think I'll ever forget about this game anytime soon. A game teeming with so many memorable moments that deserve their own separate video essays, and a world that is unprecedented in terms of style and visual flair. And just like what some wise monks had to say about the game when discussing it on forums, you can love something and still be critical of it. If anything, I'm still thinking about this game. I'm still playing it, and I'm still very annoyed with this game's irksome habit to constantly remind me that I'm playing a video game. But in the end, I want more. More missions and characters by way of downloadable content, more extensive modding support, and some major overhauls wherever it's possible. CD Projekt Red may have messed up big time when it comes to marketing and management, but the people who are actually responsible for making this game pulled through with one of my favorite single-player experiences in a long time. And for as divisive and controversial as this game is, I don't regret a moment playing it, if only because it reminds me of how video games is simply the perfect form of escapism. Thank you for watching. Okay, so in the event that you made it through all of the video in spite of my shitty Xbox 360-esque microphone quality, then first of all I want to say thank you. This is the first time I've ever made a video of this length and caliber, and I also wanted to take this opportunity to give a bit of a shout out to sort of an old acquaintance of mine who I used to both talk to and also play with a little bit back in the day, who goes by the name of Racevic. This was long before his channel blew up to the extent that he's blown up now. And if you're interested in videos relating to, or commentary videos, I should say, about different video games, then definitely check out his content if you haven't already. And I wanted to give a shout out to him because he was actually the guy who inspired me to make this video in the first place. So if you made it this far, then please let me know what you thought. And if you liked the video, then please consider hitting subscribe, and I'll step up my editing game in future videos and hopefully invest in getting a better microphone. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you then. Peace.